The Twisted Melons.
Welcome back to All That Jam, where music has no limits. We are joined by Twisted Melon today. How are we doing, guys?
Hey, thanks.
Very nice. Amanda, how are you doing?
Doing very well. Great to be here and very excited to have you all here. You're joining us from a little bit further away than our guests normally do. Do you want to tell everyone where y'all are based?
Yeah, well, I'm in Helensburgh, so I'm on the kind of Firth of Clyde, about 25 miles outside Glasgow.
Yeah, and we're in Glasgow here, me and Paul. But we're all from Kintyre originally, which is a peninsula on the west coast of Scotland. We've been in the Glasgow area for about 25 years or so.
I never knew. I'm gonna sound like a dumb American here. What that Wings song was about until I saw your website, and then I was like, ding, 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 ding. All
Yes.
came together for me.
Yeah, Paul McCartney was technically our neighbour growing up.
Oh, nice.
We didn't see him much. You know, he was off in the hills.
Right.
Didn't come much, but yeah.
That's fantastic. So you guys want to each introduce yourselves and what you play, and then we can get into your journey. You've been together 25 years, pushing 25 years, maybe a little longer.
Yeah, well, I'll go first. I'm Steve. I'm the bass player. Do a bit of keys and vocals as well. And I'm the oldest of the three brothers.
I'm Paul. I play guitar and I sing, and I am the middle and therefore most contentious brother.
I'm Mark. I do drums and back vocals, and I'm the baby of the group.
Baby of the group. 500. Your website says you've got 500 shows under your belt, which is a nice body of work there. Actually, I love on your website that you have the set list, because that really helped me. I'm a big fan of set list and set list construction, and that helped me dive into a little bit about songs that have disappeared and things like that. But we'll get into that. But what is the origin story of the Twisted Melon?
I suppose it depends how far back you want to go, because obviously as brothers, you know, growing up, we used to go on like family holidays, and our parents would be playing music in the car, and so we'd be singing along in the back of the car, and then we kind of worked out that harmony was a thing, and that, you know, we could sing different parts, and so we kind of almost started off as a kind of, you know, a vocal harmony group in that way. But then when we were teenagers, we were all in different bands, because when you're teenagers, like that few years in between, that's quite a big gap at that age. You know, so we had our own friend groups and we were all in different bands. But then, you know, we all kind of came together once we were all old enough to play shows in bars.
And there you go. And that was what, around 2000 that you guys got together?
More or less, yeah. Yeah, so there was another lineup before Mark joined. So Mark being the youngest, we had another drummer and another guitar player, and the band was a four-piece at that point. So in the late 90s, we had you know, a couple of years with that lineup. But you know, we weren't doing as much recording and or as many gigs at that point. It was really when Mark came on board that it became, you know, more of a thing.
Mm-hmm. And so I was also just checking out some information about what you all do, and I was curious from your perspective to get a sense of what the music scene and music community is like where you are. That's a big part of the music that Kevin and I have kind of grown up around in, and I was just wondering, in terms of types of music, you know, festivals? What's it like out there for all of you?
Where we're from originally, there's a big culture of lots of different kinds of music. So there's a very big West of Scotland piping culture. There's a very big trad scene. There's guys who play fiddle and guitar and do traditional Gaelic singing. There's the mod, where people will go and compete to sing Gaelic songs. And then there's also, we grew up through playing in brass instruments, in brass bands. We learned a lot of classical and a lot of different test pieces, a fair bit of different religious music, and went on an awful lot of trips to travel. Because if you look at where we are on the map, you're traveling for about 3 hours before you got anywhere. There was quite strong bonds formed with your fellow musicians at that time, and then from that, those guys who learned music but were interested in some more exciting forms of music, there was a kind of burgeoning rock scene for each, and we were sort of, for each of our age groups, we were sort of at the center of that. First time we all played together was actually with a different band, where we were asked individually to go along and join and play jam with a blues band. And so I was a guest lead guitarist with them. Mark was a guest lead guitarist with them as well. And Steve played the bass. And I think the first time we did play together, it was in that context. So yeah, a very supportive environment, and I think a very eclectic group. Different groups of musicians would find themselves together, and it's pretty healthy.
I'd read about this was a couple years ago. I had been reading some posts about an underground punk scene and some other things like that, and it just made me wonder, coupled with what you're saying, you all bring together a number of different styles in your music, and I love the descriptions that you have on your website. Do you all find that as the years go on, you kind of lean more in one genre than another, or is it actually different where you're expanding maybe what you do to encompass more sounds and different things?
I think over the years, we've added a lot to our sound, adding different technology, just becoming a bit more experienced, having a bit more vision, having more ideas, bigger ideas. I think that we've leaned into that, and everything that we do progresses in what we've done previously, I think.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back, before we came on, what's listed on Bandcamp is your EP Gandhi. It's actually from an album, right? Is that what you were telling me?
Yeah, we recorded the album Deadly and Amazing, which is obviously a very modest title. And we had it's the album closer, really, and was a set closer at the time. And the EP was it was put together as a sort of balance, because you have like a 13-minute long kind of epic. So then the rest of what was there was like, well, we can do that, and we can do this, and we can do this. And it was seen as I think we were taking a similar theme in the lyrics, but applying it in a different kind of different context. We had a more kind of more stripped down, very electronic kind of sound in one of them, and we sampled one of our own live tracks to create another track with some rapping that we hadn't really done before, and we had a very folky finger picking style song on that EP as well, and that was all variations on the same lyrical theme. War is bad, classical heavy metal stuff, really. And we just thought that was a good way to showcase how we had flipped our perspective from being sort of more or less a straight ahead rock band.
Right. And I guess some of those songs still kick around. I was looking, I didn't see Always a Risk. I see that disappeared maybe like 10 years ago or something like that. That's the electronic one you were talking about, right?
Yes. Well, you know, as we age, remembering lyrics becomes a problem. So there's a lot of lyrics in that one. And I think as well, when we do a live show, having a track, playing along to a track, is kind of like, well, you know, it's a little bit live. The last version we did of it, I think, was completely live. That was a little while ago. It's a good point, actually. We'll maybe resurrect it.
Oh, but you still have like Gandhi still shows up, which is really, I told you that's a hell of an opening salvo for a band to be like, hey, check us out.
Yeah, well, I think that the thing is, because we've had the same lineup for so long, we've got stuff in the locker, you know, that we can pull out. And, you know, even if we haven't rehearsed something, we can probably, you know, we can give it a go. It just depends on the audience, what the audience is, what they might be up for. So obviously, you know, some audiences will tolerate a 13-minute mostly instrumental track and others won't. It depends where you're playing, and we do play in quite a lot of different places. You know, so we play in the city, but we also play in, like, you know, little pubs out in the country, on islands. You know, and you know, in some of those places, like, you can go off on a tangent and people will go with you as well. You know, so it's people can be like quite open-minded.
Yeah, I love. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I love the jam section that you included. This was on a different platform. Maybe It's Not the End of the World, which I think is one of your more recent releases. That was kind of a nice extended section, even for something I think is studio, right? That's still a studio release. Yeah.
So I think, you know, what we can realize is, like, you know, we like pop songs, but, you know, we notice a pattern in all our songs. We tended to have like a kind of instrumental outro, or like a kind of bit at the end where we kind of have a kind of freak out. And so we decided to kind of lean into that and just, you know, so the history of that actually was that, like, Paul had written the song, and it went through quite a kind of, you know, arduous process of getting the version. And then Mark, like, did a remix, because we hadn't really done remixes at that point before, but because it was like quite it was kind of EDM kind of influenced, kind of dancey kind of track. Mark did a kind of more kind of techno remix, and then we tried playing that remix live, and that really kind of led us towards, you know, what we ended up doing. And then we went back and re-recorded the kind of live version that we had ended up doing.
It sort of evolved over a number of years. We tried things live, we tried different jams, and it became the version that we re-recorded, which is the set closer in current shows.
I could see why. I could definitely see why. The energy there is really great. And I think I read, is that part of maybe several releases that will be an album forthcoming, I think, this year? Is that the plan?
That is the plan. Yeah. We hopefully will have we've been working on a lot of tracks, some of which really do mirror one another, and some of which are quite disparate. That seems to be our thing. So it's finding the track listing for that keeps the thread together. The kind of, I don't know whether you could really say it's a narrative thread, but a thematic, something thematic that holds it together beyond it just being played by us. But I think there's what was it you said the title was? Stuart and Bazooka?
No.
Reclaim Your Brain is maybe a working title that we've had for a while. and so the theme is just the individual versus all the electronic noise that we swim around in all the time.
Love it. And Kevin, we know a number of bands who have been doing different types of things related to releases. I'm thinking of Kendall Street Company, which is a band here in the States. They play so many different genres of music, heavy metal sounding, you know, country, folk sometimes. And so they do monthly releases, I think, and they're all over the map in terms of their sound. But like you said, there's still this kind of connection point between them. So I love when bands will do that and kind of go in whatever direction they want, because it still sounds like you. It's just, you know, slightly different versions.
Don't they have an alter ego?
But yes, they do. It's a German trance
sauerkraut. They called it sauerkraut or something.
Yeah, it's true.
I think it's a lot more common now than it was when we started. You know, the feedback that we got from labels and things at the time was just like, you know, you're too eclectic. I don't know what this is. You know, you're doing different genres every track. But I think, you know, the kind of remix culture, mashups, streaming, all these things have, you know, made people more eclectic, and listeners are more eclectic, you know. So now, you know, it used to be that, you know, you just couldn't listen to Metallica and the Smiths. You know, but now you get people who do listen to both of those things, you know. So it's a lot less tribal, you know, and people are kind of a bit more open-minded than they were previously. So I think that, you know, it kind of suits us, but we still like to, you know, like an album to be a kind of cohesive body of work, and we might, you know, have tracks that are sitting about, and we'll keep them, you know, and we'll say, right, okay, that's not going to be right for this album, but it might work in a future one, so we'll just like keep that in the background and release it later.
Right. You've seen the music industry go from physical media, CDs, like you were saying, people burning their own CDs, you know, things like that, to now where it's all streaming. It's all about subscription services and things like that. What you mentioned record companies, you obviously shopped stuff around before. Do bands even need record companies anymore?
It's a good question. I think the problem that bands kind of have, certainly in the UK, and I'm not sure what the situation's like in the States. I think in the States, you can kind of be a big band in your state and you can kind of get regular work, and people are maybe doing, you know, like worship shows and stuff. And, you know, you've got, I think in Scotland, a lot of people do things like function stuff, you know, like so weddings and things like on the side to kind of like keep going, because it's very difficult to have a career unless, like the BBC, which is like the kind of government radio station, unless they back you. So I would say it's almost more important for the BBC to get on board than for a label, because you can kind of do a lot of the label stuff yourself. But I think tour support is a really big one, because what we're seeing is you get a lot of kind of solo artists now, but it's really difficult for bands, especially like larger bands or lineups, just the cost of touring, you know, in Europe. We've left the European Union, so like getting across to Europe is really difficult for bands, and so it's very expensive. But there's other ways of getting out there, and I think probably it's something that we haven't really done very much, is like, you know, online performances and things like that. Which may be something that we might need to start thinking about in future, like as a way of getting what we do out there, because we are very much a live band.
I think as well, a lot of bands are really canny about what a record company actually is now as well, whereby, you know, the BBC are really great, but they don't put you into £500,000 worth of debt before you start anything. You know, it's not really free money. I think everybody knows that now. And so the having to speculate to accumulate, doing that to scale from, you know, finding your own funds to do so, I guess makes a bit more sense, rather than tying yourself to loads of debt for years to come.
Right. Does the BBC have a John Peel type show guy anymore that breaks bands and has bands come in and play in the studio? Because I always have loved just the concept of what he did, and that he did it for what, 20 years or whatever, and so many fantastic iconic performances came from that, you know.
Yeah, they've kind of, I mean, his son has a show, but it's really, they've got a station, you know. There's something called BBC Radio 6, which is kind of new music. There's like a youth orientated station, Radio 1, but they're very mainstream. So 6 music is really like the way in. But to get played in 6 music, you need to kind of be making waves in your kind of regional area as well. So like Radio Scotland.
What the hell happened? Oh, that was weird. What is it doing to me? We all right, guys?
Yeah.
Can still hear you.
All right, there we
Yeah.
go. That was strange.
Oh,
See,
I think he's here. I don't know. Let me see. Hang on a second.
That is weird. I don't know what happened. So strange.
Maybe the BBC don't want us to be talking about this stuff.
Somebody's listening. That's always that's my answer for everything. But
yeah, so I think, you know, like radio is quite difficult. So where we are from in Campbelltown, Mullikintyre, there's a radio station that's all run by volunteers. And we get quite a lot of radio play there. There's also some online stations in Scotland that we get plays on. But commercial radio in the UK is very like kind of pop orientated. You know, you don't get a lot of, you know, like kind of jam bands or, you know, progressive music or anything like that on the radio, just like because the time format. As I say, Radio 6, you know, there are some shows on there, so that's really the kind of place for bands like us.
there's very few commercial stations in the UK, and the ones that do exist have all been consolidated under the same ownership, and they generally tend to play the same types of music. There used to be a rock station in Scotland that's closed down, and it's all mainly pop focused now.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Right. Focused as well. So you get a lot of the same 5 records played all day across 5 or 6 stations.
Right. There used to be in America, it was every radio station had their own programmer. So you could like be huge in Baltimore and nobody ever heard of you in other parts of the country. And then at some point, conglomerates bought up all the radio stations, and there was one guy programming 50, 60 radio stations. And I think that's kind of where you're going to. All of a sudden, you don't have all these other independent voices that may discover something.
Yeah, it's very London centric in the UK, and we don't really have that kind of college radio to the same extent either. You know, so you don't. I think, you know, about 20 years ago, they kind of stopped the funding for a lot of the student unions, which meant a lot of the kind of touring circuit for up and coming bands. You know, they used to go around all the student venues, and that's kind of like got stopped as well, you know, and there's small venues closing all the time in the UK. So they're talking at the moment about what they can do to kind of help with that, because obviously, you know, if you don't have small venues, then there's nowhere for smaller acts to play. And then how do you get big acts if you don't have small acts? They're actually talking about having like a kind of levy on the really large shows to pay for the smaller shows, because you know what it's like, these arena shows nowadays, you know, it's like, I don't know what it's like in the States, but here it's like, you know, £100 for a ticket, £150, £300 for Swift, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I've heard of similar things in Canada. There's some bands in Western Canada, Manitoba, who we've talked to. And there, I think, are programs and just different ways to support artist. I have not heard of anything like that in the States, but I think that's a great idea. I'm trying to think who would do that. Maybe independent venues would be more open to something like that, but that makes a lot of sense. And it feels like a kind of a broader community move too, which would be really positive for everybody.
Yeah, I think they're starting to wake up to it. Like the government funding tends to go into more kind of traditional music. In Scotland especially, you know, because there's a lot of like traditional music, like folk music, and you know, like pipers, fiddles, that type of stuff, and that's like seen as the kind of indigenous culture, and so they want to try and push that rather than, you know, rock music, which is seen as a bit more of a kind of modern, you know, commercial like type of enterprise. But I think it's all kind of like interconnected, and you do get kind of crossover between that, you know. So in Scotland, you get a lot of like kind of rocky bands that have got, you know, a bit of kind of fiddle within it. You know, there's quite a lot of that type of thing going on.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting to me because I know last year, Kevin, we had talked about some articles that were coming out of the UK about larger numbers of music festivals being canceled for various reasons. And this was happening here too. We were just noticing kind of a very obvious pattern of just hearing about more festivals that were either downsizing, you know, from multiple days to maybe one day, or just canceling altogether. And I was curious if that has affected you all, maybe anything that you were planning to do at all.
I think there are less festivals than there were, say, 10 years ago. I think some of that's economics, some of it's leaving the European Union. But we basically, you know, we kind of do our own thing as well. So we're involved in the organisation of the Mull of Kintyre Music Festival and also the Kintyre Songwriters Festival. So I'll let the guys tell you about the Songwriters Festival.
Yeah, well, Kintyre Songwriters Festival was the idea of one of our friends, two of our friends. And in the January before the first one that was supposed to be, our friend Kenny died in a car crash. And we got together with our friends and decided we're going to keep his vision alive. And that was in 2008. And we've done it every year, barring the COVID years. It's grown. It's a platform to give people in the Kintyre area who might be writing songs in their bedroom, they've never performed in front of people, and more experienced people, a stage to perform their music in front of an audience who's there to listen. We've had a lot of success stories with people who've come along, they were just playing to themselves really, and now they are playing other festivals, they're releasing albums, they're doing everything. So it's a good grassroots thing to encourage people to get out there and play their songs.
That's fantastic. Songwriting. How do you guys write songs? How's that work for the three of you? I see stuff is all listed as all three of you as the band as a writing credit. How does it work with you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that's kind of a bit of a kind of Lennon and McCartney type thing where it's not really the case, you know, like there's usually more input from one person, but you know, so sometimes I mean it varies. It all ends, you know. Sometimes it's just like, you know, Paul will write a song on a ukulele and bring it in, and we'll do something with it. Sometimes we'll jam, and then we'll take that and, you know, like write kind of together on that. I think that probably the stuff that's most successful is the stuff where like the three of us are involved, and a lot of the kind of the instrumental stuff, you know, that's like comes from jams.
Yeah, I mean, whatever you do, it's sort of falling out from somewhere. You know, like if you're just sitting on your own, it's falling out of some whether it's the back of your head or flying past you in the air, like Mark Bolan said they were, who knows? But the idea, I think, I definitely agree that the more input from the three of us, the better, because that it strengthens the idea, because it gets communicated and then communicated back, and that keeps it keeps the idea sort of honest. It keeps the idea fresher, and we keep each other right with it. So I think the more developed an idea is, when you bring it to the others, that you're sort of still, you sort of become very entrenched in what that idea was. You need to be open to say, well, maybe it'd work better like this. And I mean, he's a far better drummer than I can be. I certainly can't drum. I can't beatbox as well as he can drum. So he knows what he's doing. Same with the bass playing. It's absolutely fine to have suggestions, but I think when you take the conversation out of it, get out of the way of music, that's when it really takes off.
There you go. And the lyrics, some of them tend to be a little political, which I dig. You don't get a lot of that. Who is the anybody the main lyricist, or is that also whoever comes up with the words at that for any given song?
Paul's most prolific, I think, in terms of lyrics, and he has, because he's singing it, he has to be feeling it as well. So if there's anything that he doesn't quite dig, then it doesn't make the cut.
Yeah, I think as well. Yeah, I mean, things have to be memorable. You need to be able to remember what it was that you were talking about in the first place, and so those things that make you initially very angry kind of stick, so things people should be singing about injustice. People should be singing about things that could be better. And I mean, ultimately it's a song as well. It's kind of like, I always say that if you rely on a song for your information, you're as well using a biscuit to find your way around the country. It's not for that, but it's about, some people will listen to the words and some people won't. But for those who are, then have something they can get their teeth into. I see.
All right. You're pretty good at the line. I always say that songwriting is about the line, because it's the only thing you hear while you're singing a song live, and it's the only thing you can latch on to. Whereas a poem, you can look at the page and see all the lines. And I think that you are really good at dropping the memorable line there in some of your tunes. So kudos to that.
Thank you.
I think, in terms of the improvisational aspect, I mean, we've always kind of thought, if you look at like classic bands, like say Led Zeppelin, where they can do like a 20-minute version of a song, and they do other songs within that, so like there's all like blues standards and stuff that they'll slip in and out of, because they've got this kind of underlying knowledge of music.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of wanted to always kind of get to that stage, but not make it just about blues music, but basically all kind of popular music that's happened, over the last like 50 years, and just have that, kind of percolating under the surface, and try and, so little things can pop out unexpectedly in different areas, and you can change a sound, and it'll maybe bring it into a different era and things like that. So, but I think, just in terms of like the spirit of rock and roll and the spontaneity of something that is only ever going to happen once, it gives people a reason to go to a live show, especially because there's so many acts that use tracks nowadays. That if you're doing something that, even the three people on stage don't necessarily know what's going to happen next, that's incredibly exciting, because you're creating something that's a one-off, and that makes it something that you're never going, you're going to miss out if you're not there.
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess along the same line there, set list. Who writes the set list? I see that you have some songs that tend to show up show to show, but you also throw other things in there. Things move around. Is it a collaborative thing, or do one of you have the job of writing the set list?
It's kind of an argument, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think we try to get a set that works for what we want to do, where we're playing, that shows the different types of things that we do. Depends how long we're playing, because we've got the core elements of what we do, which is song-based, harmony, vocals, and we just go off into different ways. We'll try things, we'll jam things, we'll see how the set list fits together, and just try and make it a cohesive show that builds, drops, according to how we're feeling at that point. We've got enough songs that we could do different set lists every night, but it's good to keep a thread going through it.
And new songs. Ryan Stasek, the bass player for Humphreys McGee, was joking that there's an unwritten rule in jam bands that you can't play the same songs every night. And he's like, I don't get that. Basically, you have a new song, you want to play it every night. It's like your new kid. You're like, hey, check it out.
Yeah, I always liked like the Pearl Jam thing, where it's just like they change the set list every single time they play, and they can basically play any song that they've ever written at any gig, and that would be the ideal place for us to be. But we obviously, like we've got day jobs, so we can't quite get there. But it's nice to be as close to that as we can be.
And I think changing things on the fly as well is always a possibility. I think depending on how long the show is, if we're playing like a smaller venue, like a little pub or something, and we're on for maybe 2 or 3 hours, if we were just to play all our own tunes, they wouldn't have a business. Okay, even if it is the only pub for like, I'm just going home. So you need to be able to engage people with something that they can grab hold of and that they know. So you pepper maybe. You work out maybe 4 or 5 20-minute set lists. Mm-hmm. And within that, you'll have a couple of tunes that, people will know that one, and leave it kind of loose apart from that and see where it goes, jam a little bit here. I think if you're sitting ticking stuff off a list in a situation like that, it sounds like you're ticking stuff off a list.
It certainly does. All right. You have something on your YouTube channel called The Madman Is Sure. Can you explain what the concept behind it is? I found it fascinating. I wasn't sure what was going on until I had watched a couple of them, but you want to explain what that is?
Okay, so the tune originally was a jam that we had in the studio. It was one of various guitar effects that did a nice thing when you played some notes, and we played along, and then we took the drums and the bass for that, and extemporized guitar and keys over the top of that, and we were struggling for a title because we had a title that we weren't happy with, and then I think it's a Robert Anton Wilson quote appeared randomly on the internet, which was only the madman is absolutely sure. He's a very big fan of Maybe Logic, and that's sort of what the tune is doing. Is it's sort of moving across the notes, and it's sort of finding what the note should be by a sort of calculus. So it's finding its way through what it's becoming as it goes. So I thought that thematically worked. And once we had the tune, then Steve.
Yeah, well, so there was one night Mark had on YouTube in the background, and we heard this, so I think it was Terence McKenna, and there was this like kind of voiceover underneath the music, and we thought that sounded like quite good, but we couldn't really decide on what voiceover to put. So we released the instrumental version, and then it was really during COVID, lockdown, kind of stuck in the house, had a bit of time in my hands more than normal, and I thought, right, what if we do like just like every week we release a different one, and we just have like a different, you know, a person with an opinion that might be like quite esoteric, quite different, controversial, and just put that out, you know, and you know, finding that, you know, it was you had to kind of look in the right places, kind of strange corners of the internet. But the idea was just like, you know, like something that people might not think of, and just, you know, do that as a series, as something for. It was because we couldn't get together to play. It was our kind of equivalent of these, you know, people like playing online like during COVID. So we just have like a different one every week, and we put those out. And like some of them, like I think one in particular, like got more views. I think it was the Lily, the guy who John Lilly, who like thought he could talk to dolphins by taking LSD. So for whatever reason, that one seemed to be more popular.
LSD. All you had to do was say LSD, and people sign up.
Yeah. So yeah, there's that one. There was, and you know, eventually, you know, just like very strange ones. So there's one guy who didn't like that the government were reducing the amount of sugar in his favorite breakfast cereal. You know, so that's one of them. You know, so there's a lot of variety in there. And you know,
well is, you know, it's not really a voiceover. For some of it is a voice under. So the idea is not that you're really able to get the information the person's getting across. It's like it's
a text.
It's muffled. It's supposed to be kind of wash over you a little bit and be a little bit abstract.
Yeah. Super creative. I love the David Lynch one, and you know, I saw the timestamp on a lot of those, and I wondered if that had something to do with COVID and, you know, a way to use that time, because we've talked to so many artists who did things differently, you know, because they had the time to do it, and there was just, you know, not as many options for them. Who chose what to include? Just or did you all kind of together find things, because it is super eclectic, and I love that.
Yeah, we all kind of threw in ideas, but then I had to like try and work out how to make them work, because you know, it's not just a case of, you know, taking a YouTube video and sticking it over the top. You know, like there's bits where the music comes up and you have to leave a gap, and you know, so there was like a little bit of work, you know, there to make it work. But yeah, we've thought about because we haven't actually played that track live yet. So we're thinking about, if we're going to do it live, you know, like have the sampler and you know, like have one of the voiceovers, or maybe have multiple options. Or maybe do like a cut up and have various ones, you know, so that like the live version has like, you know, parts from various different ones. You know, there's lots of options there that you can do for something like that. And I think if we did do it live, we probably wouldn't try and recreate the studio version. It would be something new each time we did it as well.
There you go. Yeah, you could put like whole sentences in a sampler and have Noam Chomsky say something, and then David Lynch say something a minute later.
Yeah, it'd be good to randomize that or something. Yeah.
That's fantastic. All right, so we have when is the new album coming out, or is it out?
Maybe the autumn. So we've got a few tracks just about finished. Maybe a single in April, and then just all steam ahead on the album. So yeah, it's getting there. We've been working away on it. We've been working with a lot of new different sounds, different textures, but just getting it so that we're all happy with it. That's the main thing at the moment.
All right, and it's going to be, I guess, on Bandcamp. You have a few up there. I love pushing Bandcamp because people can throw you a couple bucks if they want, as opposed to Spotify, where you can't even buy a chocolate milkshake after a month. But is there going to be physical copies of it also, or is it going to be a digital only release?
I think we've always done physical, so I think something that we haven't explored in the past is things like, you know, Kickstarter or things like that. So it might be good, you know, to do something like that, to see what, you know, kind of interest we could get. There's a new vinyl pressing plant has just recently opened in Scotland, so that might be an option for us to do something with them.
Because the last vinyl that we did West of the Rock was a vinyl plant in the Czech Republic, because there was no vinyl plants locally available. So yeah, it's good that we've got somewhere in Scotland now. It's only 40 miles along the road rather than the other side from where we are.
Right. You had mentioned CDs before. Will it end up as a CD?
Yeah, I mean, I think we probably will do CDs. It's just it's difficult to gauge, you know, the demand,
Right.
because it's a while since we did the last CD release. So you know, it's a question of how many do you get made.
They should do an on-demand thing. Like, you can go to t-shirt websites. I can buy a t-shirt from somebody. They print up the t-shirt, mail it to me. Why can they not do that with CDs? I mean, the technology obviously exists to burn a CD. It would take them an hour to do it, package it, and get it in the mail, you know?
Yeah, it's a good point. And I mean, something that we realized as things moved online was it was very difficult, you know, to you know, like you can't like sell a Spotify link at a show, you know, but if you could get it so that because people at a show, especially if they've had a couple of drinks, they really enjoyed the show, they're probably open to buying something, but you know, they're not going to go the following Thursday and go on a website. You know, they're more likely to pay there and then. So if you could have something which is, you know, like a Bandcamp voucher or something, you know, that you can buy something there and then at the show, and then they can download it later. That seems like it'd be a lot better.
Right. One of Bob Weir's projects, Rat Dog, back in the early 2000s, used to do, you could buy a CD of the show. They would burn it after the show if you just hung out and waited for $25, and you could go home with a copy of what you had just heard, which was fascinating. But I think that the world moved past them mighty quickly with streaming, and all that all of a sudden started happening. So your live stuff, when do you have anything on the calendar? How does that do you guys play around a lot? Or being in Scotland, I guess it's the smaller market. It isn't like the States where you can drive to another state and
yeah, we've only really been getting back into playing in Glasgow since. So we played our first gig in Glasgow for 5 years in just before Christmas, but we're now playing again in April. So it's you know, we're getting back into. We're planning on doing like regular like shows, but we played down in England last year, down in Sheffield. So you know, we'd like to usually when we bring an album out, we do like an album launch show, and then we probably do like a kind of Scottish tour round about that launch as well. So that's probably what we'd be looking at this time again.
Yeah, I mean, we've been all around the country. Been up to Inverness in the Highlands, Oban on some of the islands, like Jura, Kintyre, through in Edinburgh. So we do get around Scotland.
All right, very nice. And how hard is it going across? I guess it's easy enough to go to England or Ireland there, but you say it's become a problem trying to go to Europe, huh? Because of the Brexit and all that.
We did a show in Belgium before leaving the EU, and that was simply a matter of taking our instruments and a kind of an adapter for the plug, and we went along. We played the show. We got the plane back, and it was fine. And now the amount of bump paperwork that you have to get through is almost not worth it.
It's like working visas. Everyone has to get checked at customs, going there, coming back. It's just made it a bit more difficult than it was.
Right, which is sad.
Yeah.
Because you're right there. Going to France should be easy, I would think, you know?
Yeah, it should be, but it's just, it's the way things have kind of gone. But we can play in Scotland. It's good. We like to get to places like Mark said, we went to the Isle of Jura, for example. So that's like a place. It's like a few hours on the ferry. You've got a population of 400. All they've got is like lots of deer and a whiskey distillery. But going somewhere like that is really fun, and the audiences are really up for it because it's something different.
Right.
And
400 people. Wow.
Yeah.
400 people and 7,000 deer. There was a house there that George Orwell lived in. He wrote books over there. He nearly died of TB because of the damp there. So it's got quite a history as well.
Yeah. Famously, there was a band called the KLF. I don't know if they were big in the States. They were a kind of ironic, like pop kind of art project, and they basically burned all their royalties on Jura. So they burned like £1 million on the Isle of Jura. So going over there, we were kind of following in their footsteps. That was quite interesting.
Chuck 10 pence on the beach instead.
I hear you. All right, you got anything else you want to throw out, Amanda?
I don't think so. I just appreciate being able to hear from you all. My personal experience musically with Scotland is more on the Kev Darge, like deep funk stuff that he did in the UK. I think what you all do is very familiar sounding to a lot of bands that I listen to. Just your jam style, and that you're bringing in that electronic sound in really smart ways. So I'm excited to share this and appreciate your time.
Yes, it's great for us because when you say jam band in Scotland, it's kind of rarer. There's definitely that kind of culture in the States, but we're kind of an outlier in that respect. I think over here. You do have there's like post rock and stuff like that. So like Mogwai and bands like that, who do a lot of kind of cinematic and instrumentals and that type of thing. But that kind of jam band thing is probably rarer. But I think it is kind of coming more like it's becoming more of a thing. I think Wolfpack and that these kind of online, kind of shred type, like kind of technique, kind of, YouTube channels and stuff like that. I think that's bringing back like the kind of performance aspect a little bit more. And so I think you've got a lot of kind of younger musicians. I mean, I was kind of the tail end of like kind of hair metal, the early end of grunge was my kind of like teenage years. So I was like very into like Pearl Jam and stuff like that. Paul, I think Nirvana, Faith No More. Mark, what would you say your kind of teenage stuff was? I suppose.
Yeah, Manic Street Preachers, but I was also writing Rage Against the Machine, Soundgarden, all of that type of stuff. And as long as it was loud when I was that age, it was the main thing.
There's an incredible market for weird though. With King Gizzard, they are so huge in jam band circles in America, and I dig what they do. I mean, that kind of stuff is up my alley, but I find that very strange how they've been so embraced.
Yeah, I suppose just having a name that stands out, like it helps. It's the same with like the psychedelic porn crumpets.
Yes,
it's just a name that sticks in people's mind.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of helps.
I think Gizzard, the thing with them is that they back it up as well. It's not just you put it on. It's not just normal. It makes you go, no, what's going on there? Put that on again, and then they've got you. So.
Oh, that's true. That's a good point. And even here, that label jam bands, just to go back to that for a second, people, even artists who are a part of the community, have a lot of different opinions on whether they want to be associated with that or see themselves that way or not. And so it does tend to be one of those things that it doesn't have clear boundaries, which is one of the things I like about it. Because of that, there's a lot of people who may or may not want to own that. And so it's interesting, as time goes on.
The older a band gets, though, the more they're like, call me a jam band, just buy a ticket, buy a t-shirt.
Yeah, we appreciate the support, and we know we're going to get the support, so that works for us. But maybe that's not how they feel, early on.
Talking of weird and stuff like that, before vinyl became what it was, you used to be able to pick up old albums for £2 or £3. So picked up a lot of King Crimson, Yes, Frank Zappa, all of that type of stuff, and they've been played extensively in our flat. I mean, Paul used to live together for 20 years. So with things like that, always got to play, probably an influence on stuff like Gandhi, The Outsider on the 3.3 album. Maybe it's not the end of the world to an extent. So that type of weird influence has definitely always been there.
Right. Yes. Yeah, no, I can hear it. I can definitely hear it. We're going to put a bunch of links down. You guys email me anything that you specifically want, but I'll put the Bandcamp in there and your regular website so people can check it out. And do you guys have other merch, t-shirts and stuff on your website? I don't remember if you did.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
That's always a good way to support a band, is to buy the t-shirt. Anything else you guys want to throw out before we wrap up?
I guess I'd just like to say thanks for getting in touch, giving us this opportunity. It's really nice to chat about music, not just each other.
Right. Well, very good. Very good. Hang out for a second after I run the outro here. Everybody watching at All That Jam Pod, all over all those social medias. We have a .com, allthatjampod.com. So go over and check that out. Make sure you like and subscribe. And remember, stay beautiful, but don't stay underground too long. We'll see you soon.